don't we start with Andrea? And if I could, if I could remind you to help with the microphone so that your voice gets recorded. Thank you.
I'm feeling a bit nervous about going first because I wasn't here yesterday for the little outings that people did of their little bits of their lives. So I'll just wing it. I have a PhD in public health that I got in 1999, and always anticipated that I would have an academic career somewhere. I wanted to teach, I wanted to do research, and I had gone to Johns Hopkins. I had a pretty high-powered degree. And then at the same time, while I was in graduate school, I got married. And so following graduate school, I had this little negotiation with my husband about, well, how are we going to manage this two-career family thing? And we made a decision together that we would stay in the Washington, D.C. area because we had family, extended family here that could help us. And we wanted, once we had children, for them to be close to their grandparents. So I took the jobs that came along, and they weren't always the most ideal. A lot of times they would look like they were a really terrific opportunity, and then I would get there and I would be miserable. But always in the back of my mind was this idea that, well, what I really want to do is be a college professor. But there, at the time, were only 2 schools of public health in the Washington, D.C. area, Johns Hopkins, my alma mater, and GW has a school of public health. Well, the problem with an academic life at either one of those institutions is that, I don't know how many of you know this, but faculty there live on soft funding. So 75% of their salary, they raise themselves through their grants. And I watched the people that were faculty members there work 60 and 70 hours a week, not only to bring in the 3 or 4 grants that they needed to support themselves, but then to actually do the research and get the publications out so that they could continue to exist. And this just didn't seem like the right model for me. The women that were successful there either had much, much older children or were single and or had partners and decided not to have children. And so that just didn't seem like a reasonable option for me. So I moved from soft-funded job to soft-funded job, and we intentionally purchased a home and created a lifestyle that could be where we could essentially survive on my husband's salary when we started having children, because I didn't know how I was going to feel once I had children, whether I was going to want to work part-time or full-time. And this gave me a lot of options. Planning things this way really provided me with a lot of options. And I tried to see the yin and the yang. As I made sacrifices, I would see job ads in San Francisco for an academic job that looked just perfect, and I would have to turn it down. But along with those sacrifices came this freedom of knowing that if I got into a job situation that was uncomfortable, I didn't have to stay there. I had the freedom where I could change jobs frequently, and I did. And when our first child came along, I worked part-time, and that worked really well for me. When he was about a year old, I went up to 80% time, and eventually waited to be full-time until my youngest son was 3. And that really worked out. And it turned out that this program at UMBC that I had no idea existed brought me on as a tenure-track faculty. So I think the message that I want to send is that it took a long time, but doors will open if you're willing to look at different alternatives.
Thank you very much. So Anne, do you want to?
I work for NASA in atmospheric chemistry, but as it turns, actually all my degrees are in physics. And my path to getting there as a grad student, I was part-time for many years. And then when I first started to work for NASA, I worked as a contractor and I was a support scientist for many years. And this was all really good because I was having a pretty big family. And my strategy was to work like a maniac when I was at work and not work at all when I wasn't there. And that worked out pretty well, and a long time went by, and eventually I became a PI and a project scientist, and now I'm an empty nester, and I get to travel all over the world and really have a great time. I am involved in global change research. I love it. Everything about it I love. It's interesting, it's challenging, and I feel like it's really important. So in that sense, it sounds like my life is tied up in a nice, neat package. Work part-time for a while, then work like, have a great career. But part of this book, if you were to read it, you would read essays by two of my daughters. They're my grown-up, all my kids are grown up, but these two girls had careers in science. One's a doctor, the second one's an oceanographer. And so what this book gave us an opportunity was think of, well, how does this part-time crazy balance work? Not just for the mother, but for the kids growing up. What it's like having a scientist mother who's like constantly doing little experiments for you. And it turns out they liked it, so that was pretty good. And so I guess you'll hear a lot from other people, too, about part-time work and putting it together. And I would echo what the first speaker said. You get opportunities, and you have to have patience and faith in yourself and faith in your choices. And for me, it was always family first.
So, Marilyn?
I'm Marilyn Merritt, and I don't think Gina actually mentioned my field. I'm an anthropologist, but I'm also a linguist. I call myself an ethnographic linguist, and one of the classes I teach is called Language and Identities, and the title of my essay was actually Identities and How We Build Upon Them. My own personal background is I started this business a little bit earlier than many of the others. My children are now grown, and both of them have children. In fact, I have a daughter who is actually sort of living the life that many of these young people are now looking at. What I wanted to emphasize is that identities are something that we develop as our life experiences go on, and many of you are still just undergraduates. And I want to emphasize to you that everyone you meet, everyone you associate with is a potential part of your life story. And you can never tell who's going to turn out to be somebody that's important to you later. So forming friendships, forming networks, keeping up with people, and learning from the people that you have an opportunity to learn from, which are often your fellow students and not just your professors, is very important. And keeping up your networks, these end up being able to help bolster your own identity as taking part in your own career. If you find, as I did, that I decided to become a mother, I married very young, and then it was actually 4 years later, but I turned out to be a mother at a very young age as well. I'd finished a master's degree, but was going on to a PH.D. degree with a 3-month-old. So, and before I finished, I had the second child. So I know about some of this going on. But when you become a mother, become a parent, that becomes a part of your identity too. And so you are constantly trying to keep up your identities in all aspects of your life. I would just encourage you to think about the ways in which you can bolster your identity and feed your own creativity and your own feeling of competence. As I mentioned yesterday, part of the time I was in developing my career, my husband, who is also in the field of public health, had an opportunity to work overseas, and so we decided to go overseas. This was after I had completed my PhD and after I had done one postdoctoral research project for which I was the director. But it still meant that when I got to the overseas environment, I was in many ways on a level playing field with other people who were wives and mothers and members of the PTA. I was also equally exploring the countries that I was living in, India and Kenya and Niger and Senegal, some very interesting places to have lived. But you are constantly learning new things, and you're constantly developing your identities, and you want to feed those. You want to feed your creativity and keep up with people and keep networking, because these will be important to you as you move from place to place.